Atlantic Challenger stands like a monument, marking the spot where luck ran out for her and her 9-man crew. I was one of them, and I suppose the bitter disappointment that we felt when she went down so very close to the finishing line was really only countered by the fact that at least we knew that we were all safe and well. Throughout that voyage, though, I'd been recording events on board, which, as you'll see later, was no easy task in the battering that we suffered along the way. But I'd also been following the story from its very beginnings for Tomorrow's World. This was a craft that was full of a lot of technology. She was designed specifically to cross the Atlantic in the fastest possible time. She made her public debut, of course, last May, in style, with a royal launch. At Hamble, near Southampton, preparations for that day began early.
Great pleasure to name this ship Virgin Atlantic Challenger, and may God bless all who sail in her.
Quick thinking by Princess Michael of Kent ensured a smooth send-off for a unique boat. She's the first craft ever built with the sole aim of winning the coveted Blue Ribbon for the fastest Atlantic crossing. To win, she would need to average more than 42 miles an hour for 3 days over open ocean. It was the dawn of the steamship age that triggered off international competition for the Blue Ribbon. Setting the pace with a 15-day crossing back in 1838 was Brunel's paddle steamer, Great Western. Over the next 100 years, the world's great liners battled for the title. By 1938, the Queen Mary had shortened the crossing time to under 4 days, and Britain held the record for 14 years. Then, in 1952,
after clipping 10 hours off the Queen Mary's Atlantic crossing record, the United States, fastest liner in the world, proudly approaches Le Havre to make her first docking in Europe. The official run is from Ambrose Light, New York, to the lonely Bishop's Rock Light off Land's End. 2,942 miles, which she covered in 3 days, 10 hours, 40 minutes. Now the United States leaves Le Havre, bound for Southampton, where she will get a truly British welcome.
So the Blue Ribbon went to the United States, along with the Hales Trophy, which has been proudly displayed to visitors ever since. Made of gold-plated solid silver and weighing 100 pounds, it now stands in the Museum of the Merchant Marine Academy near New York. But just across the water from this museum, the Americans were welcoming the boat designed to take that trophy back to Britain. They were doing it in typical New York style. And in Manhattan's Water Club, the press were being introduced to the 9 men who made up her crew. The captain is Ted Tolman, a businessman and powerboat and motor racing fanatic. Second in command, yachtsman Che Blythe brings to the project an unrivaled experience of the sea. Airline boss Richard Branson is the fare-paying passenger required by the rules.
200 years before that.
Dag Pike is the navigator and has a lifelong enthusiasm for powerboats. Also on board are Steve Ridgway, in charge of building the boat. Steve Goodwill from the Royal Marines, along with his colleague Chris Dougie Duggan, and chief engineer for the trip from the Royal Navy, Nobby Clark.
But clearly our attempt on the Blue Ribbon will be very different to the present record holders. After all, our craft is smaller than one of the lifeboats on the SS United States.
Right from the start, the careful design and construction reflects the craft's special role. Most high-speed powerboats are designed for races not far offshore. This one, built entirely of aluminium, must be light enough for high speed, but also strong enough to withstand the forces of the open Atlantic. By the end of 1984, the upturned hull is ready to be rolled out and turned over so that work can begin on the topsides. For skipper Ted Tolman, whose company Cougar Marine is building the boat, it's a first chance to see the results of an idea he's been living with for more than 2 years.
Well, I think it was a challenge that was disappearing. You know, everybody uses the word blue ribbon, athletics, chocolate bars, you name it. The whole thing is that the blue ribbon was a very important thing for the sea many, many years ago. And that unless somebody had done something about it, the liners last did it 30-odd years ago. Economics dictate they will never do it again. So again, why should a cup sit in New York in the museum over there? We should get that out as well.
Well, people have tried since 1952, when the United States held that record. People have tried to break it, and they've all failed. What makes you think you're going to succeed?
Well, I think they haven't done the whole job properly. They haven't looked into the logistics. It really is an enormous program that has to be gone into. They've tried to do it with outboards. They've tried to also go when the media dictated they should go, because the cameras were there. This is the time we've got to go. You can't do that. The weather window is so important that we have to try and come across when the weather dictates, and that's what we're going to do.
So you think you're sort of better organized than anybody else?
Absolutely.
At this stage of construction, hoisting her aloft is the only safe way of twisting her round to get her right sides up. Her 11.5 tons are suspended by only a single bolt, a delicate operation for the team led by Steve Ridgway.
It's always a very nerve-wracking moment. Everybody's very impressed at the moment because it looks quite something sticking up there over the building.
What are the particular design features that you have in the boat?
Well, obviously, as you can see, it's a catamaran. I suppose that's the most radical part of it. It's a 65-foot catamaran, deep tunnel boat, and we need that to carry the weight that the boat has to carry for the fueling going across. And at the same time, with the engines that are in the boat, it will give us a performance advantage over a conventional hull.
She's going now. Look at that.
Good. I hope we never have it at that angle again.
So do I.
And this is what she looks like 2 months later. The top sides have been built up, the decks have been laid, and at this moment the cabin that'll house our 9-man crew is just being lowered into position.
Once you get down inside the hull, you can discover the secret of the boat's stiffness and its lightness. A very tight web of stringers and cross beams, all made out of aluminium. And this area has to be particularly strong because this is where the engine will be, the gearbox will be there, and the shaft running down back behind there. And what you see just there is one of the 10 fuel cells.
They'll hold a total of more than 3,000 gallons, but even that, they've calculated, will mean 3 refueling stops to get her all the way across the Atlantic. Why? Well, the 2 engines will have a thirst for 150 gallons of fuel every hour. They're German-made 12-cylinder MTU turbocharged diesels, among the elite of marine engines. They have to be squeezed into the tight space that's left between the fuel cells.
I think the main thing about these engines is the fact that they can run continuously day and night. Most diesel engines have a rating, an intermittent rating, which only allows them to run at full power for perhaps 3 or 4 or 6 hours. But these engines, they give you a full power rating and you can use that continuously and you have no reservations about doing it.
Nobby Clark, the ship's engineer, is counting on their reliability. Making running repairs down here in mid-ocean will be no fun. But the engines are guaranteed to produce without trouble a total of 4,000 horsepower throughout the crossing.
And all that power will be delivered to these 2 rather special propellers. They're called surface-piercing propellers because when she's running at speed, the water level coming along the flattened part of the hull there will pass through the very center of the propeller here. So therefore only the bottom half is in the water. That's why the blades have to be so wide, because there are only 2 in the water at any one time to drive her along. The great advantage of this system is that because everything from here up is kept in the fresh air, All this massive hardware that supports the propeller is kept out of the water and provides no drag at all.
By May this year, she's launched and running. The characteristic spray thrown up by those propellers, the rooster tail, becomes a new sight in the Solent. Challenger begins a series of intensive trials. Meanwhile, just up the River Hamble, the crew, along with the 3 refuelling teams, meet up to hear just what they'll be in for from Che Blythe.
We leave New York, follow along Long Island here. We've got to keep slightly out here because of the shoals and everything else. Then up just off about 20 miles off Halifax, where our first rendezvous point is. The second, we carry on, keep the land on your left. We get to an area here called the Flemish Pass. This is our second rendezvous here, and we should be able to see this place because there's huge oil rigs in this area, and we've got a rendezvous by the oil rigs. And this is the danger part. We go from here straight across the third rendezvous, and hopefully we can find you or you can find us. From there, straight across to the Bishop's Rock.
You've been across the Atlantic so many times. Do you really want to go again?
No. The truth is, of course, that anything which gets the adrenaline going and becomes exciting, you can't help but want to be involved. Having rowed across the Atlantic, having sailed across the Atlantic, having flown, having gone across the QE2, there's only one other way to go across, and of course that's a very high-powered speedboat.
More at home on the placid waters of London's Little Venice is the Challenger's sponsor, Richard Branson.
3/4 million for interior. That comes out to more than 3.
He's recruited a little help, not in juggling millions for a new 747, but in getting fit for the ordeal.
Hi, Richard. Well, are we ready for the real work?
No, I've got to go. I've got another call. Sorry. Bye. I suppose what worries one the most is that one of us will give up physically and let the rest of the side down. To that extent, for the last 4 months, I've got up at 6 o'clock every morning, had a trainer knock on my front door. He's taught me to ride a motorcycle, to juggle and get fit in the most interesting of ways, and actually made getting fit thoroughly enjoyable.
But exercise alone doesn't guarantee you'll be fit enough for this trip.
Go on, blow, 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 blow. Next.
Each crew member is put through a thorough medical examination.
AWINHYTUVX.
Deep breath. Out.
The truth is, no one has ever tried submitting a human being to 3 days of the sort of pounding you get in a powerboat, and any weakness could prove disastrous.
One fit man.
But however fit, we had to be prepared for the worst. None of us would survive if we didn't know what to do if things went wrong. On a Royal Naval survival course, we learnt the art of righting a capsized life raft and how to get aboard quickly. After all, we always knew that if Challenger were holed at speed, perhaps by an iceberg, she could sink in a matter of minutes. And in the cold waters of the North Atlantic, it's reckoned you can survive only 20 minutes without protection. With our survival suits, we should be able to increase that time to several hours, assuming we have time to put them on. Clearly, the warm Solent was a very long way from the cold North Atlantic, and at the time, the exercise didn't seem to be taken all that seriously. However, as things turned out, I'm glad we did it. Now, with the summer date for the scheduled attempt getting ever closer, the new powerboat must prove her performance. Unlike the large liners who've held the record in the past, she doesn't push her way through the water, but travels at speed by skimming or planing over the surface. And the air forced down the tunnel between the hulls helps to give her that lift. But in a boat as unusual as this, those design ideas need thorough testing to convince engineers and designers of her speed and efficiency. She soon becomes a regular attraction on Southampton water as her performance is timed along a measured mile over and over again. However, these early trials do throw up a problem. She's taking too long to reach planing speed. When she's running slowly, the propellers are completely submerged, and getting them to turn fast enough in that condition to lift the boat up onto the plane is overstraining the engines. So it's back to the Hamble base to try an experiment. Long plastic pipes are fitted to each side of the boat. The idea is that when she's moving, air will be forced down the pipes to a position just in front of the propellers. The bubbles in the water should then allow the props to turn more easily and get Challenger up to planing speeds. The experiment worked, even if the pipes eventually came adrift. Now permanent air ducts will be fitted to the hull. But not every trial ends so successfully. A passing fishing boat comes to our rescue after one engine suddenly loses power out on Southampton water. It's all the more worrying because the scheduled date for the attempt is only 6 weeks away, and today we'd planned to leave on our first long-distance run out into the open sea.
What's that?
Fuel problem with the port engine, yet again.
Is it the same problems, or?
It's a fuel line, there's air bleeding into it. It's one they altered when they did a modification to it, and it's sucking air into it, but that's not the only problem. I think the lift pump is now gone as well, so we're
compounding our problems. This is, if
Yeah.
we don't get the crew on the boat soon to working together, we ain't going to go anywhere across
That's
the Atlantic.
right. And electronics are playing up again, so... But the radar, there was a fault. It was going round at half speed this morning, and then coming up to full speed, and then going down to half speed, and we're getting all sorts of pictures, and now it's back to normal, but we don't have a problem.
The radar recovered, but Nobby still has to sort out the fuel pump before we can start our trial.
Nobby? Yeah? Starting now.
We got a problem, as you know, and this seems to be happening on too much of a regular basis at the moment. We want to get out there as a crew for the first time. We are going to get out today sometime or another. You know we've got a lift pump problem. Even if we don't get out until tonight. We are going to run, however, for the full length. We will do our 750 miles and we will do our night running, even if we do it outside here in the channel. It's very important that we get our working together as a team.
You looked a worried man then, Nobby. What went wrong? Well, we lost all the fuel on that engine, and the problem was we couldn't get it back. We had to take the discharge pipe off the lift pump and backfill the pump because it got a big airlock in it. But as you can see, we've succeeded and everything's fine now.
Outlook for tomorrow, 6 to 7, decrease in 5. There's also a gale warning possible later on today. So what in fact we're going to do, we're going to go out to meet the bad weather coming in. As soon as we see it, give it a miss, come back. What we should do really is come out as far as we can into somewhere about this sort of...
With the boat back in business, the plan is to go as far as possible out into the Atlantic to see how the boat and the crew shape up.
Well, which will help me to
We
get
might
the
as well
system
go and have a look at the finish.
Get a smell for it, shall we?
For most of us, this is our first attempt at learning how to drive a 36-ton powerboat. In fact, the twin throttles are simple enough to operate. The driver's main job is to watch where he's going. Steve Ridgway takes the first turn at the wheel, leaving Hamble.
Can I leave this up to you?
Well, I think you ought to know how it all works, Richard.
Right.
At the moment, I'm just putting these waypoints in now, which are the various points on the course that we're going to go through. I'm now on waypoint number 9. I've worked them all out beforehand on here.
Right.
And what you do is enter them in here, and then it will give you the course and distance that you have to steer to reach that waypoint, based on the position it knows where you are now.
The rougher ride soon tells us that we're leaving the familiar territory of the Solent and heading for open sea. It's a combination of high technology and Dagpike's skill that'll now keep us on the right course.
Boy up, starboard there. Yeah. The pillar boy, yeah. Right, out.
In the cabin, the noise is horrendous. But out on deck, it's blowing a 50-mile-an-hour hurricane as well. Holding a steady course out here means just that. Let go of the rail and you'd be blown away. In fact, holding anything steady isn't easy. Whether it's my camera or Che's drink. Mind you, that's easily solved. A seal child's beaker and not a drop spill.
Try the autopilot. Yes,
It really is going to be interesting with this sort of a chop just to see how this auto hangs in.
Yeah, I'm watching the compass as it goes round.
Yeah, I'm watching this one here as well.
The autopilot should keep us on course and take some of the strain off the driver.
Let it go. Let it go. Bring her back. Leave the red buoy to port. Leaving the red buoy to port. Turkey curry?
Amongst all the noise and pounding, one way or another, we're going to have to eat as well. Self-heating cans are the answer.
Light green touch paper and retire.
If you find any Mars bars, I'll have one.
Yep, Mars bar or a blue ribbon.
Richard makes way for Dougie in the driver's seat, part of the regular hourly changeover. As night approaches, the watches are reduced to half an hour as it gets harder to concentrate. Dawn brings our first sight of the Bishop's Rock Lighthouse, the end marker of the Blue Ribbon crossing. The next time we see it, we hope we'll hold the record. This trial has not taken us beyond the continental shelf, and all of us know that crew and craft remain untried in the large swells of the deep ocean. But it has given us all a taste of how difficult steering a fast boat over long periods can be.
Tell you one thing, mate, I'm not flying Virgin anyway. What about you on the helm? Why were you all over the place?
Attack is the best form of defence, isn't it? You were much worse.
I think the sea conditions were different again, and it was very handy this time to be able to see how the boat would run with loaded up front and with the sea longer width. I thought it handled very, very well. Has anybody got any comments on that?
Very great confidence building thing today. I felt, I've never felt quite so comfortable in that boat as it was today.
We were running at just about 2,000 RPM, weren't we? And
we were getting 44 knots showing up on the speed. 44.
And that was across the seas and downwind, and felt quite good. And that was still a lot of fuel in the forward tanks.
The next day, attention shifts once again to the propellers. Very little is known about surface-piercing propellers of this size, and trial and error is the only way of finding the best design. Today, something quite new is being tried. Props with 5 blades are to go on. Just like the original 4-bladed design, they're cast in bronze alloy, and they'll function half in and half out of the water. But hopefully these will reduce vibration and also increase Challenger's performance. 2 hours later, she's comfortably planing up Southampton water.
It sounds very different, and it certainly seems to be smoother, and I would think, judging by this speedo, which is under red since day one, that it's probably faster. We'll go up on the mile in a minute and do it on the clock. The rooster pattern's different as well.
And the five-bladers do in the end prove to be the best choice for the crossing. Now Challenger is as ready as she's ever going to be. It's time for her last trip around British shores to Liverpool. Next stop, New York. Challenger now seems tiny as she's swallowed up by a ship for which crossing the Atlantic is no challenge, but a regular business.
Yeah, this is where we find out if we got our clearance heights right, because that whole back bit of the mast, which you can see has been removed, was all done deliberately so that it could be taken off and tipped over to fit in under the ship. Well, we've got 3 chaps going over with the boat. It's just to do a lot of just extra insurance work, clipping things off, cleaning things, making sure things aren't corroding. You know, she's had 2 months of pretty hard trials, as you know, that when she comes off, she looks all tickety-boo and shiny for the Americans.
As trial followed trial and days merged into weeks, the glamour of New York palled. We could only play the waiting game, unable to get on with the job we'd come out here to do. Clearly, that frustration was beginning to make itself felt to all the crew. The reason we remained penned into New York was simple: weather. All the harder to believe, since where we were on Long Island Sound, it was perfect. Occasionally, hopes were raised, only to be followed by a depression, in both senses. At daily weather meetings, we were brought up to date with the latest news.
Dag, give us the bad news and the good news, please.
Well, this series of depressions which have been tracking across the North Atlantic day after day recently, there is signs that it's coming to an end at last. The sort of high pressure building up, the high pressure from the Azores is pushing its way north, but there's still fairly close isobars there which, you know, indicate a fair amount of wind, but my feeling is that by early next week we might be in with a chance. You know, it looks as though the situation's developing quite well.
Yeah, what's the fog like?
The fog is fairly extensive over the Atlantic, but I think we've got to learn to live with fog. You know, if the wind and sea conditions are right, then that's really what's got to dictate this, because that determines our speed. The fog we'll learn to live with.
And the icebergs?
We'll learn to live with those as well, I think.
There was always something to be done on the boat.
They're very smart clocks,
yes,
aren't they?
$100 clock.
Even filling the hulls with airbags to help keep Challenger afloat a little longer, if she were ever holed. Then, quite suddenly, the waiting was over.
Well, it's 4 o'clock on Monday morning, and we're off. And it's very sudden, because the weather window has opened for us quite unpredictably. Even after a month of waiting here, it's suddenly the off. Morning. And it's going to be a very, very tight thing. We have a window on the weather, and we're going to be playing cat and mouse the whole time with the elements. If we don't move out of New York here, we're going to find that Cyclone Claudette is moving its way up here and is likely to affect us pretty badly. Up here, we know that we're going to run into very heavy fog, and that's, of course, the area where the icebergs could also be. Out in the middle here, we know we're going to have a rough patch because there is a depression centered right over the center of the Atlantic. And over on the British side here, that Great Depression, which has been giving Britain all its miserable weather over the past few weeks, we're hoping is just going to move north to allow us through. So let's hope the sun shines just as we reach the Bishop's Rock. And that's the sort of tight weather window that we'll be working in.
We're not going to get that in here, are we?
By 5 o'clock, the dawn had broken to give us a perfect final view of Manhattan. Ahead lay 2,948 nautical miles to be covered in less than 3 days, 10 hours and 40 minutes. At 6:44 and 55 seconds, we passed the Ambrose light, and the race was on. Meanwhile, in Richard Branson's record store in London, a control and communications centre had been set up to keep the public and the team of technical experts informed of our progress. Their task was to help us cope with every twist and turn of the rapidly changing conditions. But as we left New York, blue skies and calm seas made it seem more like the start of a pleasure cruise as we got into our regular pattern of rest and work periods. A good omen seemed to be the early news that Richard had become a father for the second time, even though there was no way that he could see the photos being shown in London. Driving onwards at a steady speed of 40 knots, we were heading for the first of our 3 planned refuelling rendezvous in the grey and foggy waters off the coast of Halifax, Nova Scotia. We were bang on course and already nearly 2 hours ahead of our schedule when we arrived at our floating filling station. As we manoeuvred into position and prepared for the well-rehearsed refuelling procedure, everyone's spirits were so high that there seemed to be only one possible answer to the question, why are we doing this? Our schedule had allowed an hour at RV1. In fact, it was a mere 16 minutes before we were casting off and on our way once again. This load of fuel would have to see us through the next 740 miles, and the extra weight of all that diesel meant that she needed the help of a few bodies up front to lower the bows and lift her up onto the plane. Ahead of us lay the night we most feared, our dash through the iceberg zone. Our only eyes were the Vistar night vision equipment. By next morning, we were still unscathed, but a totally unexpected problem hit us.
Hello, can you tell us where you are now?
Yes, we're just off of about 50 miles north of Cape Race, heading for our RV2 rendezvous, which, as you know, is just off St John's. Over.
And does that mean that you're on schedule for the record?
Yes, we are on schedule for the record. Unfortunately, we've had to slow down a little, but we're still well on time. Over.
What's causing you to slow down? Over.
We've had a fuel blockage on one of our fuel tanks, and we've had to reduce our speed and move our rendezvous point 30 miles closer to us, but we think everything is going to be okay.
Ted's confidence masked the difficulty of the decision he'd just taken, whether to lose 3 hours by changing course for St John's and the certainty of getting fuel, or to risk running out before our second rendezvous. Radio links back to London from the onboard computers monitoring the state of our engines and fuel tanks allowed the engineers back there to help us calculate the best strategy.
We'll be able to get the boat up on the plane.
We made it, but with fuel for only 2 miles in hand. Moving the tug nearer had solved the immediate problem, but now it put the next rendezvous out of range. Then came the first really appalling weather. First light on Wednesday showed the results.
The devastation around the cockpit tells the story of an unexpectedly rough night. We hit a front, we arrived on the wrong side of it, we had to drive right through it. That was me just taking off and hitting the ceiling and coming back down again. Probably a cameraman's favourite position, this. And this front has obviously slowed us up. Now we're into big problems because as a result of slowing up and because of the wet weather, the rough weather, we have lost 300 gallons of fuel, which means that we're going to need another refueling. Now, we're behind time already, but the latest calculations suggest that we were to keep filling at this present speed, which is practically breaking the boat apart, then we might just break that record, including an extra fueling stop. So that's what we're trying to do. I think everybody's incredibly impressed at the way the boat has stood up to this. I'd be surprised if there weren't some frames that were loose or cracked down there in the hull. But that's something that we can only speculate about. Sorry about the shaky pictures, as they say.
The boat running short of fuel and its crew bruised and battered, this was the day our morale reached its lowest point. Even the simplest action had now become a slow and painful undertaking. For 7 hours during the night, we'd lost radio contact, but our first priority was to organize more fuel to make up the 300 gallons we'd lost. Indomitable, the tug waiting at RV3 was too far away for us to reach and too slow to come to us in time. But as the storm abated, we were saved by a stroke of luck from the air.
So what's all the excitement about at the moment, Fred?
Well, we've just found the Nimrod, or let's put it this way, he's found us, and we've just spoken to him. And what he's doing at the moment, he's surveying our sea area to see if he can find a ship closer to it than the Indomitable, so we can get fuel from her.
So what we got left in the tank now? Well, what I can gather from the gauges, which you know are not all that accurate, we should probably run for maybe another hour at least.
And the refueling ship's 2 hours.
But sure enough, the Nimrod pilot managed to contact the French-registered container ship, which offered to give us some extra fuel. But without the special hoses and couplings that were needed, it would clearly call for some clever improvisation. The tricky task of negotiating this transfer fell to me and my far from perfect French.
He'd like us to stop here. He takes 20 minutes to slow down. Nous avons stoppé, oui.
De London. Indomitable.
Merci, c'est compris. So, he wants us on his starboard side.
Is it we run out of fuel?
No, he's asked us to stop because he takes quite a while to stop.
Oh, okay, right. Well, let's have a plan now.
For the first time since Monday, the sun shone and the sea calm. With the Nimrod patrolling overhead, we maneuvered closer to the vast bulk of the cargo ship and prepared to take on 3 oil drums. It was a risky and difficult operation.
Keep that away from there, otherwise you're going to end up with a hole in it.
But it worked perfectly. When he'd put this old hand pump on board, Nobbit had no idea whether we'd ever need it. Now it was invaluable, and the 120 gallons of fuel that it put into our tanks set us firmly back on course for RV3, the Bishop's Rock, and the Blue Ribbon. Everyone's spirits rose as we thundered on again, guided by the RAF Nimrods towards the tug that had waited patiently for our arrival.
Good, that's fine. We've got it. Thank you very much. Valves open.
It was another textbook refueling, but by now we had lost 8 critical hours, and it looked as if we were leaving the brief spell of good weather behind. Another night of battering lay between us and the finishing line.
At the moment we're just running through the rough patch leading up to the 5th and final refueling spot. off the speed or we're going to lose the record. So we're driving at well over 40 knots, probably about 45, 47 knots into 4-6 seas, and it is extremely uncomfortable. We're all leaving our seats and hitting the ceiling and doing all the other things. If you just take a look around the floor, you can see the kind of devastation that at one time we used to clear up, and now we just leave lying there because we know that whatever's stored away is going to come flying back out again.
By this time, our precious computer, as well as some of the other electronics, had been beaten to destruction. But with time so short, all we could do was to go flat out and hope. One final rendezvous remained, a Royal Navy vessel sent out at the last minute to help us out. With only a couple of 100 miles to go, the mood was confident as we took on this extra final load and set off on the very last leg of this Atlantic journey. Prophetically, skipper Ted Tolman told me about his feelings.
What do you think might happen?
I don't think might happen.
Sounding like that might finish her off.
Well, we're in such big waters, and it's been quite hard, and you're never going to find a run like this one for any of these types of waters, and the problem is that if we hit it too many times, it's like anything, it's going to bust. But I'm convinced the boat will be all right, but it's a worry, it's a mental worry more than anything else.
In London, they plotted our course and predicted a safe, if unspectacular, time for the crossing. At St Mary's, due to be our first landfall, blue ribbon cocktails were the order of the day in town. Then suddenly, everything changed. It seemed we hit something.
The Mayday signal was received from Atlantic Challenger, and the reported position was 5015 north and 0917 west. 9 people on board and the boat rapidly sinking.
Even now, she refused to leave us completely. Overhead, our friendly Nimrod was back again, this time to stand by us and guide in the rescue vessels. It turned out to be only a brief wait. Soon we heard on our portable radio that a ship had altered course to take us on board, where we'd await a helicopter to fly us back to land. The last time we'd been in this position during survival training, we were laughing and singing. Now we just felt tired, grateful, and relieved. Within an hour and a half, the banana ship Geese Bay came into position and prepared to pick us up. It all went like a well-planned military exercise. Boarding the Geese Bay provided a particularly poignant moment for Richard. The first sight of his baby son, born at the start of our journey, seen in a passenger's newspaper. After that, there was only time for a brief drink with the passengers and crew before the helicopter arrived, and we were all quickly winched up. Just time to reflect the final irony, that we would still make it across the finishing line inside the record, but without Challenger.
Well, it's always sad to see a boat go down, but you know, you shrug your shoulders and say, well, let's have another go next year.
I think we have no choice but to do it again next year.